In August 2014, Amer Jubran was charged under a new law that didn't even exist when he was arrested, that makes harming the relationship with a foreign government a crime of terrorism.
And at some point, one of them shoots, according to regulations, in a leg. But Shawamreh is hit in the hip. Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We start with the case of Amer Jubran, a Palestinian who was given a very harsh sentence by a Jordanian court, 10 years at hard labor. He says he was sent to prison because he spoke up for Palestinian rights and refused to become a collaborator informer for Jordanian authorities. It was a protest rally in front of the Jordanian embassy in London.
We are here today outside the Jordanian embassy to demand freedom for Palestinian father and human rights activist Amer Jubran. Amer Jubran is facing a 10-year sentence from a military court in Jordan at the behest of Israel. Amer Jubran's family is from near Al-Khalil in Palestine. They were ethnically cleansed at gunpoint by European Zionists and forced into exile to Jordan. Amer's grandfather was shot by an Israeli soldier and left to bleed to death in the middle of the road. His relatives who remained in Palestine live under brutal military occupation. At college age, Amer moved to the United States, but he never forgot his roots, and he dedicated his life as an activist in the struggle for justice in Palestine. Amer Jubran has a long history of being targeted for his activism on behalf of Palestine, first in the US and then in Jordan. In the US, he formed the New England Committee to defend Palestine, and in November 2002, 2 days after leading a demonstration in Boston calling for justice in Palestine, the FBI stormed Amer Jubran's home and arrested him under the Patriot Act, initially holding him without charge. When public outcry made it difficult to continue holding him, they initiated deportation proceedings against him, and he was deported to Jordan in January 2004, where he continued his activism for Palestine. In 2006, he was beaten and arrested at a protest at the Israeli embassy in Amman. He was under constant surveillance of the notorious Jordanian secret police. On the 5th of May 2014, 20 armed men in black uniforms stormed his home where he lives with his wife and 4 young children, smashing their doors and windows. The secret police abducted Amer, and for months he was interrogated at an undisclosed location without charge and without access to a lawyer. Finally, in August 2014, Amer Jubran was charged under a new law that didn't even exist when he was arrested, that makes harming the relationship with a foreign government a crime of terrorism. Following his visit to Lebanon to speak at an anti-apartheid week function, he was accused of working with the Lebanese resistance Hezbollah against Israel, hence harming Jordan's relationship with a friendly country, Israel. Last month, on the 29th of July 2015, he was sentenced by a military court to 10 years hard labor, reduced from a 15-year sentence. During his interrogation, he was told by the secret police that any decision made about him involves our American and Israeli friends. Amer says, "It all started when I refused to be a sellout and work against the Lebanese resistance. I was told then that I will be sent behind the sun for such a refusal. And frankly, it's very easy for me to disappear behind the sun rather than to be, well, outside but a sellout and traitor. Essentially, Amer Jubran is being persecuted and imprisoned because he refused to work for Israeli-Jordanian intelligence as an infiltrator and informant against the resistance. We are here today to tell the Jordanian government to stop doing Israel's bidding and release Amer Jubran. It is shameful for the Jordanian government to imprison its own citizens on behalf of Israel.
Shame on them.
Shame on you, Jordan!
Shame on you, Jordan!
Shame on you, Jordan!
Shame on you, Jordan!
Victory to the resistance!
Victory to the resistance.
Free Amer Jubran! Free Amer Jubran! Free Palestine!
Jubran's defenders are asking that on October 5th, people make a special effort to contact Jordanian authorities and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Turns out that that commissioner is a Jordanian prince who has not said one word about the Jubran case. Along that line, what do you think of this? The UN, a Human Rights Council, is now being headed by that human rights-loving nation, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. One website mentioned the situation in this way: Saudi Arabia heads UN Human Rights Council while planning to crucify a human rights activist. Mohammed Abu Khader was burned to death by gasoline in 2014. The trial of his killers started and ended. Moving on to Palestine. Mohammed Abu Khader was burned to death with gasoline in 2014. The trial of his killers was suspended in June and hasn't started up again, and there is no explanation. In a more recent burning, 3 of the Dawabsha family were burned to death this year. Apparently the killers' names are known by Israeli authorities, but after 2 months, none of them have been charged. I want to talk, though, about an earlier killing, maybe about 18 months ago, March of 2014. Yusuf Shawamreh. He crossed the Israeli apartheid barrier that went through his family's farmland. He crossed it where it was not a wall but a fence. He did it with a couple friends to try to harvest a wild food plant. He was shot by soldiers and died. His case was marked closed after the Israeli army investigated and decided the soldiers had acted according to proper procedures. We at TSVN have mentioned this case several times, frankly, because it was such a travesty that the Israeli paper Haaretz declared in an editorial that it was a war crime. Nevertheless, the case was closed and still is closed. We recently realized that the Israeli military actually gave the B'Tselem human rights watchdog group their surveillance video of the event. Some of the details, well, really one of the details we had been reporting was apparently incorrect, but the bigger picture is even worse than we had imagined. Initial reports had said that the use had gone through a hole in the fence. The Israeli authorities say that there had been a hole, but they knew that young people had been going through the fence to do harvest, but they decided to stop all that by mounting an ambush. So they closed the gap up with some wire and prepared a military team and lay in wait. Here's some surveillance video of the incident. You notice the video picks them up when they were far from the fence. We skip ahead. Apparently the youths find the gap closed by wire and unravel the wire. The soldiers, of course, who no doubt could view all this minutely with binoculars, watch this. They could have yelled at the youths to go away or fired a warning shot, but they don't. The youths go through the fence here. The soldiers come out of their hiding place, and at some point one of them shoots, according to regulations, in a leg. But Shawamreh is hit in the hip. Even though the ambush had been prepared in advance, it somehow took the ambulance 45 minutes to go down an empty military road from about a mile or so away. Shawamreh dies. Why did they use live ammunition? Why did they have an ambush in the first place? What grave crime were these youths committing? In IDF speak, the youth were judged fence saboteurs. That qualified them for getting shot at. And why were the Israelis so concerned with the fence? Was it a matter of terrorism? No. Deputy Commander of the 77th Battalion of the Armored Corps, Major Avishai, testified to investigators that the area was known to be one where smugglers would bring goods to Israel. So it all had to be stopped with the utmost of violence. There's a bit more. The Israeli journalist Gideon Levy went out to the fence in April of last year and spoke to the boy's father, Sammy. And then Levy wrote, after having killed his son, Israel has now revoked the entry permits he and his other sons had so they could work there. Your permit is canceled, Walid, the eldest, was told this week at the checkpoint when he tried to enter Israel, where he worked in construction. His father's permit was canceled too. Israel always behaves this way with the families of those it kills. lest they take revenge. Thus it inflicts a double punishment, killing and taking possession. Those were the words of journalist Gideon Levy. Levy will be speaking in the Northeast this October. He's being brought by the Tree of Life Education Fund. His first talk is October 18th in Old Lyme, Connecticut. For more information, contact tolef.org. As I record, reports are coming through of attacks on Palestinians by Israeli settlers and soldiers all across the West Bank. To humiliate, headscarves of women are being torn off. It's supposedly revenge for a murderous attack that left Itam and Naama Henkin dead on a road near Nablus. But how can one tell Israeli of revenge measures from its normal routine of beating, humiliating, and killing Palestinians? Attacks that take place virtually every day. A number of groups led by the U.S. campaign to end the Israeli occupation are hoping to prevent the U.S. from giving Israel another $45 billion in weapons. Here's a quote from U.S. Vice President Biden. "We are fully prepared to sit down with the Israeli defense leadership with a menu saying, 'What do you need?'" Amazing. You think Biden ever sat down with the mayors of Baltimore or Detroit with a menu of civilian goods and asked them, "What do you need?" The petition campaign to deny Israel the $45 billion has now over 60,000 signatures. You can mention that to your congressman or senator. We link to it on our site. Another idea the campaign has is selfies, for people to take pictures of themselves with the hashtags "No Weapons for Israel." Here's an example. A few years ago, representatives from the nations of the world gathered together and made a promise that they would take measures so that the greenhouse gases that they've been producing would not increase the world temperature more than 2 degrees Celsius. That's 3.6 degrees in the Fahrenheit scale that we're more used to. Well, a New York Times article on a report said we're not meeting the goal, despite all the cuts that have taken place and all the promises that are being made. We're on track for an awful 6-degree Fahrenheit increase and the flooding of most coastal cities. Now, on that subject, more from 350.org's Brooklyn event, Off and On.
The world's fossil fuel company spends $674 billion a year looking for more coal, oil, and gas. That's right. They spend over 600. You can boo on that. And Shell's looking in the Arctic. Exxon is the #1 fracker. And Hadnot wants to build the planet's biggest coal mine in Australia. It's as if someone was deeply in debt and they spent all day looking for new credit cards to sign up for. That actually was a joke too, actually. That actually was. So this is not a normal industry, though. It's addicted to carbon profits. And it's our job to cut them.
That's it. All right. Now we're getting the hang of this. We can't actually count on anyone else. I mean, the world heads to Paris again in December for the 21st round of climate negotiations. It's an important meeting. We'll be pushing hard to improve the outcome, but we know already that the result is going to fall way short of what the scientists say is necessary. the moment, the analysts are saying that the agreement currently on the table will let the planet's temperature rise about 3.5 degrees Celsius, almost twice the theoretical red line. Paris can send a signal that the world is moving away from fossil fuels, but it's going to still be up to us to get the job done. You might ask yourself, why is this so hard? It's hard because we're up against the richest enterprise in human history. Look at North America. The richest man in the world is the two Koch brothers taken together, okay? They're worth over $100 billion, mostly because of oil and gas. In fact, they're the largest leaseholders in the tar sands up in Canada. And they've announced that they're going to spend $900 million on next year's presidential election. They'll spend more than the Republicans. They'll spend more than the Democrats, the Koch brothers, party of two. That's why this is so hard.
The same thing happens all over the world. Look at the Adani Group in India. When Prime Minister Modi was campaigning, he flew all over in their corporate jet. Now they want to build that giant Australian mine, running roughshod over Aboriginal landowners and import the coal back to India.
Or let's talk about Exxon. Let's talk about Exxon a little. New documents that were leaked this summer shows that Exxon knew about climate change back in 1981, and yet they continued to fund climate change-denying think tanks for 3 more decades. Yeah. To this day, they keep funneling those super profits. This is the company that has earned more in profits than any other company on Earth, and they are dumping those profits into the pockets of climate-denying politicians. Just takes a little bit, actually. They finally admitted that global warming is real, unlike those politicians. Exxon has, but it doesn't really matter because it hasn't changed their business practices whatsoever. At their shareholder meeting this past May, they said that they would keep spending over $90 million a day looking for new hydrocarbons. Wow. Now, the CEO of Exxon, Rex Tillerson, used the occasion to mock renewable energy and say that if climate change caused some weather problems, well, quote, mankind has this enormous capacity to deal with adversity, which is easy to say if, like Rex, you earn $100,000 a day. But a whole lot of people who are on the front lines of that climate adversity earn around $1 a day.
Naomi, that makes me mad. Make you mad? Yeah. But you know what? We can beat these guys.
That's it.
Because, that's right, because truly organized people beat organized money every single time. So first thing, Bill, is that we can cut off their money.
Amen.
A few minutes ago, I was talking about the big march last September, but that wasn't all that happened that day. Uptown that night, I watched as some members of the Rockefeller family, yes, Rockefeller family, heirs to the original fossil fuel fortune, announced that they were divesting their philanthropies from fossil fuel stocks. Divestment is one way to turn these guys off, Naomi. It makes the fossil fuel companies into pariahs, spreads doubt into the market, and it makes it hard for them to raise new funds.
Amen.
And it has been an absolutely remarkable year for the global fossil fuel divestment movement. Hundreds of universities, cities, towns, churches, and foundations have joined us. Everyone from Oxford University to Prince Charles to the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which, in case you don't know, is the second largest pool of money on planet Earth.
Wow.
They have all started down the divestment path. In South Africa, where the divestment idea comes from in the fight against apartheid, There are big campaigns going on against fossil fuels. The divestment movement has reached Nepal, Vietnam, France, where the city of Paris has voted to divest. Nobel, very timely, very timely. Nobel Prize winning economists have endorsed the idea. Even the former chairman of Shell declared, and I quote, that divestment is a rational approach. We like to think so. Just last week, the California state legislature voted to start divesting the retirement funds for public employees and for teachers. Those are two of the 20 largest pension funds on earth, worth $500 billion. Wow. You know, when this movement kicked off, a lot of people said, oh, it won't matter. You won't make a dent. But let me tell you something. It matters. When you combine this movement with the fact that fossil fuel prices are crashing at the moment, it matters. And Peabody Coal officially warned investors that divestment represents a, quote, material risk to their business. So, you know, we also divest because every time we try to convince someone else that this is a good idea, we are making the argument that profits earned in this way are immoral and therefore illegitimate. And that brings us, and this is important, this is important because there's a next stage to that. If these profits are immoral and illegitimate, that brings us one step closer to a serious carbon tax, to all of us getting a much bigger piece of those profits to fund the just transition away from fossil fuels towards a cleaner, fairer economy.
And finally, a preview from next week's show, coverage of an event in front of the United Nations, a protest of the Saudi-U.S. attack on Yemen. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.